Good evening and welcome to Bugajski Hour. A happy and successful new year to all our viewers. I'm back in Tirana for a new season to examine important global and local developments that affect the lives of all Albanians. Today I will be asking important questions with a rising political personality. And our guest today on the Bugajski hot seat is Blushit, an upcoming national player as Albanians' election season begins. I will also be discussing questions about politics and world affairs that are on the minds of Albanian students. Our audience today is from the European University of Tirana. But first, I will give you my overview of America's perspective on the world. What is Washington thinking? My topic this evening is what can we expect in 2013? The coming year will be challenging for America's revival, for Europe's development, and for Balkan stability. In all three cases, the state of the economy will remain the key variable as the transatlantic zone struggles to avoid recession and strategic decline. In America, the congressional deal to avoid falling off the fiscal cliff does not address America's long-term economic problems. The last-minute compromise did not include the grand bargain on deficit reduction. A new showdown in Congress over spending cuts is now expected in 2 months' time, as America confronts a fiscal mountain of over $16 trillion in debts. Without a stronger economy, Washington's involvement around the world will diminish. This can encourage new conflicts in the Middle East and elsewhere, as ambitious regimes test Washington's resolve. In Europe, Chancellor Angela Merkel warned in her New Year message that Germany, the engine of the European Union, will face a more difficult economic climate. The German government has slashed its forecast for economic output to less than 1%, while the country's central bank has warned that Germany may come close to a recession this year. Merkel also cautioned that the Eurozone debt crisis was far from over. Berlin will have a difficult task in dealing with sovereign debts among the Mediterranean states and to maintain Germany as the paymaster. Such a role is resented by a growing number of German voters and by conservative parliamentarians. While the EU stutters, the World Bank is warning that the Western Balkan economies will shrink in 2013. The fallout from the Eurozone debt crisis is worse than previously feared. In Serbia, the region's largest economy, gross domestic product will contract by 2% as Belgrade struggles to scale back its spiraling debt. Output in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro and Macedonia will remain flat, and only Albania and Kosovo are predicted to experience limited growth. The Eurozone crisis has a major impact in the Balkans, as it remains the main trading partner and key source of investment, financing and worker remittances. All the West Balkan countries will need to cut deficits and lower the public debt, while improving the investment climate and reforming labor markets and the public sector. Such policy prescriptions translate into immense challenges in countries witnessing growing public dissatisfaction and political polarization. Where the integrity of the state is also in question, as in Bosnia-Herzegovina and possibly in Macedonia, further economic decline can turn precarious conditions into dangerous confrontations in 2013. It is time again for the Bugajski hot seat, and our guest today is a rising player in Albanian politics, and a recognized independent thinker in the Socialist Party, Ben Blushit. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, let me give you a little bit of background, our viewers a little bit of background on your career. Ben started as editor-in-chief of the newspaper Koha Jone, and in 1999 embarked upon a political career, which has been very successful. He has served as prefect of Korça, deputy minister of foreign affairs, minister of education, minister of local government, and he is currently a socialist deputy in the Albanian parliament representing the city of Korça. He is also the author of the best-selling Living on an Island, which is close to my heart because I'm also an aspiring author, though not as successful as you, which chronicles and deals with during the Ottoman occupation period of Albania. And you've also authored a second novel, I believe, as well. But we'll come to that a little bit later. Congratulations on both. Welcome to the show. And let me begin with a sort of general question about developments in Albania. Now that the celebrations are over for 100 years of statehood, it's back down to everyday realities, everyday challenges, which Albania has many. How would you characterize the coming year? What can we expect in 2013? Should we be optimistic or should we be concerned?
Well, first, thank you for inviting me, and I'm more than pleased to be interviewed by you. I think now that we are more sober from the New Year celebrations and the 100 years of statehood, now I think we can have a better picture of what the country is expecting. We have a very important date this year, which is elections. We're going to have elections in less than 6 months. And as you see, all the political parties are preparing to start a campaign. Some of them has already started it, as I saw the government yesterday. In terms of politics, this is the most important date we have, and I hope, and I'm sure we'll do the best to have a proper and fair elections in 23rd of June this year. In terms of economy, if the last year was very, very gray, because the public debt was increased, the consumption level decreased. We had last year more poor families going from the middle level to the poorness. As I said, we had more debt taken from the government, which shows that the government is not performing the way it should. So in terms of economy, the country looks in its worst days. Mm-hmm. And this is not only because of the economic crisis in Greece, Italy, or in the Eurozone, generally speaking, but it's because the country is governed not in the proper way. And this is not, and I'm not saying that as an oppositor, as someone from the opposition. This is the broad perception of the people.
Well, talking about government and opposition, European officials of various stripes have charged both parties at different times for engaging in very divisive, polarizing politics, for blocking legislation, for engaging in street politics that can undermine stability in the country. Should we expect such conflicts, such instability before the elections?
No. We're the part that we're aiming for a peaceful process. So everything we'll do before these elections will be trying to calm down the electoral fever, try to promote a peaceful electoral process, and of course try to calm down our supporters, which, to tell you the truth, are always doubtful upon this government. They doubt that this government frauds their ballots. And although this has happened in the last 20 years for a number of times, especially when Mr. Berisha has been into power, as I said, we'll try to be calm and to tell to anyone that we need a proper and calm campaign this time, because we think that the country deserves that. The country deserves some stability, of course, but most of all, this country deserves proper elections. And we're going to do everything we can to have that.
Well, what specifically can be done to ensure that these elections are not challenged, that the legitimacy is not questioned? Because we've had this for many years in Albania, that the party wins, the other party challenges, and there's a bitter battle that sometimes lasts for weeks and months, and very little work is done in the legislature, or sometimes the government isn't formed. How can it be assured this time that the elections are completely free and fair, they get full international seal of approval, and that it helps Albania? Because these are vital elections in terms of progress towards the European Union. How can that be ensured?
We've been fighting a lot in the last 2 or 3 years to improve the electoral code. And most of the, or at least some of the proposals we had, we managed to put them into the electoral code. And in a broader term, the electoral code, it seems to be much more improved compared to the previous one. Let's say that at least we'll have more counting stations this time. We had 66. We'll have at least 89 or 90 this time. Mm-hmm. So the process of counting will be much more easier. We probably will not see counting stations being there for 2 or 3 or 4 days, as it happened in Tirana last year, in 2011, when you need at least 1 week to count 250,000 votes in the city. I hope this time will be different. But what we need is that ballots are counted properly, and the will of the people should not changed by those who counted, because what had happened here in the last 2 or 3 elections, it is that ballots are counted not in the proper way, and we had proofs, let's say in the last elections, that in certain areas, probably 1 or 2 of our mandates or seats in parliament were shifted from us to the government. So I don't want to say that this time will happen the same thing, but of course we'll take all the measures we can not to repeat that and to protect any votes in any areas we can.
And questions about the Central Election Commission and lower level
I didn't want to speak upon that, but when you see it from the screen, let's say, I mean, sometimes I try to think what people think upon us. When elections approach, you think that viewing it from television, sometimes you think that the Electoral Commission is running in these elections. In fact, there are parties running in these elections, not the Electoral Commission. Mm. The Electoral Commission in Albania becomes so important. It's not very important in other countries. Mm. I was with a friend of mine, he's an Italian, and they have elections a month from now, end of February, and I was asking him, who is the head of your Electoral Commission? He said, I don't know, nobody knows. It never comes on television. Instead, the Electoral Commission here, it is the main actor for the last 6 months. Mm-hmm. Every time you switch on television, they come up and they speak for hours, they are live, everybody broadcast whatever they say. And the question is why? Mm.
It should be like a football game with the referees. Yeah. In other words, the best games are ones where you don't remember the referee.
That's right. We remember the referee, we see only the referee, and the question is why? Why it's so important? I think they should change their role. They should be silent, and unless they're not silent, they do their job properly according to the electoral code, we'll have troubles in this country. So I wish the Electoral Commission, all the guys dealing with elections this time, be more silent and leave the parties to run. Because people have to choose us. I mean, among parties, they don't have to choose the Electoral Commission.
Right, right. Well, let me ask you specifically, with elections coming up, this is going to be a busy season in terms of campaigning. Let me ask you about the Socialist Party itself. How do you differ from a Democrat Party? Why do you call yourself socialist? In other words, what does that label actually mean? What are your policy priorities? What are your differences with other parties, particularly with the current ruling party?
Well, we're trying to I think the Albanian electorate knows the difference among us and the Democrats. But of course, we're a leftist party. We're center-left. And being center-left, we have some not only ideological but programmatic differences with the rightist.
The center-right.
The center-right, of course. Speaking to the Democratic Party this time, we aim that the state has a different role in the economy. And we'd like the state to have a different role, and the state protect the poor, that the state don't necessarily have the monopoly of the economy. But of course, when it comes to regulation, the state plays its role into regulating markets. And I think this is the biggest debate in Europe also, in America. I mean, during these elections we saw, which will be the role of the state in the economy. I think that in the last few years, especially in the last 8 years when the Democratic Party came to power, they, as you see, even in the last days, they're privatizing everything. And they're privatizing 6 months before elections, which we think is not very fair. You cannot privatize the economy 6 months before elections when polls say that you're going to lose. So in terms of privatization, in terms of education, which is completely going, let's take education, for example. The government says that they have more students than we had eight years ago. This is true, but when it comes to the quality, we have lots of reasons to doubt what kind of students we send into the university, what kind of students we're getting from the university. We're getting more students, but we're getting more weak diplomas. And when it comes to health, let's say, to the health system is becoming a hell for many age Albanians who have to go there. Medicals are becoming much more unviable, let's say, compared to 3 or 4 or 6 years ago. You know why is that? It's not only because that's happening in Italy, in Greece, in Europe. This is because the state has left its share. The state left the poor people, the students, youth, they left them alone. And if there is no protection, or if there is no backing for these parts of society, the society becomes very vulnerable. And what is going on in Albania is that the rich are getting very few, and the poor are getting a lot. Every year we have more poor than a year ago. And we'll try this time by better playing the role of the state in the economy, we'll try to protect the poor parts of this society and trying to get this gap among rich and poor softer.
So you would expand the welfare net, the social security net?
Yeah, we're going to have our proposals during the next 6 months. And we'll have concrete proposals on the tax system, on the privatization, let's say, on what we're going to do for education, for health system, for pensions, for wages, for the agriculture. I think during the last 2 or 3 months we're going to propose to the Albanians what our menu and our offer will be.
Because as you know, you mentioned America. In the United States, the economic debate focuses around 2 issues, taxation and spending. And this is the sort of core of this fiscal cliff that we narrowly avoided falling over.
We already have told the Albanians what kind of taxation system we have in mind. Of course, we're against the famous flat tax. And the flat tax is the first thing we're going to wipe out.
Why are you against it?
I'm against it not only as a party member, but as someone who thinks that the poor should not be taxed as the rich. Because I think the rich exploit this world we live in more than the poor. They exploit more the air, land, and and human capacity, so they have to pay more. They have to pay more because of that, and the poor, who have not, they have to be, in a way, protected by this society. The more poor the society has, the worse it is for it. And I think coming to power this time I think it's an instrument for us and a historic possibility to protect the poor of this country, which are, by statistics, 90%.
What about the spending side? Because the government budget isn't too healthy at the moment. Where are you proposing to get the revenue, the resources to pay for these programs?
As I told, the first tax will wipe out is the corruption tax. According to the latest information from prestigious American agencies, it is $1.3 billion which went out of the country in the last 8 years. Since this government came to power, at least, it is valuated at least 1.3 billion euros.
It's the Global Financial Integrity Report.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I'm willing to believe to them. These are money who could be part of this economy. They could be invested in schools, in the streets, for a better pension system, mm-hmm. for protecting the farmers in this country which are dying, and for subsidizing lots of services, especially to give the middle class and the poor more air and more space in this society. So first of all, we find the money by fighting corruption, which this government made it absolutely a cancer during the last eight years. When they came to power, the perception level of corruption in this country, it was something. I mean, I think we're rating 112 something, mm-hmm. 2005. Now, with the latest data we had from the Transparency International, it is the last country in Europe and the last country in the region. And I tell you, one of the biggest problem we have is, where are we going? Where are we going, not compared to Germany and not compared to Japan, but where are we going compared to Macedonia, compared to Bosnia, compared to Croatia, mm-hmm. compared to Serbia? These countries are getting a better perception because the state there is not as corrupt as the state in Albania. And this is, I'm not saying that, I told you as a socialist member of parliament, I'm saying it according to the perception of the Albanian population. So in terms of corruption, we're last in the region. In terms of public debt, we're last in the region. In terms of investments, in foreign investments, we're last in the region. In terms of state investments in the education system, we're last in the region. In terms of investments in state investments in agriculture, we're last in the system, in the region. And the question again is, where are we going? Can we compare tomorrow with Macedonia, let's say, mm-hmm. with Serbia, with Croatia, which is entering the European Union? And one of the big reasons we want to come to power this time is try to push this country ahead and trying to push it forward in terms of, as I tell you, better perception, which will increase foreign investments in the country, much more wiser privatization of economy, if anything it is left, and of course less public debt. We're not going to call Albanians to vote for us and we get a bigger debt for them. Every one of them has to pay today 2,500 euros every year. Mm-hmm. It was 5 times smaller the day we left power, 2005.
When you say better perception of corruption, which is the Transparency International Index, what specifically would you do to combat lower corruption? It's never going to be fully eliminated, but how to lower it, official corruption? What specifically would you implement?
I think we have the necessary laws to fight corruption. The problem is the laws are not implemented in this country. Mm-hmm. And there are 2 things which have to be done. First is the perception of those who govern. If you see what's going on, the culture of impunity, not according to me again, or according to us, according to the European Union, is increasing in the country. Nobody is punished. If you're a minister, if you're linked to the prime minister, if you're linked to his family, you might have done everything in this country. At the end, nobody is punished from them. But if you are a farmer, I was reading yesterday that someone, a young guy, 18 years old, he was unfortunately, he was very poor, and he had to grab something to eat in his village, and the police kept him, and he hanged himself. Yeah.
In prison?
No, he hanged himself in prison, yeah. And it's a very sad story, of course. Mm-hmm. But it shows that when police wants to get the thieves in this country, they can. But why can't get a thief in a remote country, sending him to hanging himself, and then they cannot get thieves which get to television? I think if we start from that, the culture of the anti-corruption campaign will be, and it could be very successful in this country. Mm. And second, of course, is to liberate the judiciary system from government. Judiciary nowadays is very, very, very dependent on government. And unless judiciary is not playing an independent role, there will be no anti-corruption success in this country.
Well, as you know, the experience of Greece clearly shows that winning elections during time of crisis, when you're in opposition, economic crisis or economic stagnation, is much easier than actually rescuing the economy once you're in power. And there are signs that not only the Albanian economy, but a number of the Balkan economies are suffering the sort of Europe-wide debt crisis, recession, lack of investment, and so forth. Would you say that a socialist government would bring more opportunity for rescuing the economy, preventing a major recession in Albania?
Oh, I'm sure that this has been proved. All the countries, including Greece and Italy, who had economical crisis in the last 4 years at least, they went from that to political changes. Governments change in Italy, governments change in Greece. And why? Because countries need a better psychological moment. And I think these elections and us coming to power will serve as a big psychological moment for businesses, for the middle class. And this is the best thing we can do at first hand. Not saying that for all the reasons I mentioned before, for the way this government is perceived, and for the lack of motivation they have after 8 very, very long and difficult years. Of course, a party staying 8 years in opposition, it has more motivation than a party staying 8 years in power. And if you see how they perform, they look, I'm not kidding here, but they're very, very tired. You see ministers doing nothing. And you invite them in public debates, they just don't show off, because they know they have nothing to say. They have nothing to say, as I said, in terms of improvements of the economy, infrastructure, education, public debt, taxes, and the overall picture of the country, which is very, very gray nowadays.
We will break now for a few ads. Well, let me ask you about the Albanian political scene. As we know, Albania has 2 major parties. For many years, they've dominated the political scene. Do you see Albania evolving into more of a multi-party system? Obviously, we have this movement for socialist movement for integration, which has become a third force. You now have Red and Black Alliance. You have other parties coming to the forefront. How would you, looking forward, describe the Albanian political scene? Is it evolving in the multi-party direction?
It's too early to say, I think. It's too early to say if we're going to move from a two-party system to a multi-party system. Of course, these elections are interesting even in terms of what kind of parliament they're going to produce. it seems that the next parliament will be richer in terms of parties compared to this one. And this is, in fact, one of the problems of this parliament. It's a two-party parliament. I mean, as a socialist, I probably prefer that. But seeing it as a normal, how the democracy should function, probably will need more parties, because small parties sometimes they play a good role for the system. I mean, they prevent big parties from being very arrogant and very
monopolistic.
Monopolistic, yeah. So, speaking on that, on the next parliament, I think will be richer. We'll have at least more than 4 or 5 parties, because now we have a 3-level party system. We have 2 big parties, we have 3 small but big parties, and the rest is small. And when it comes to coalitions, it's too early to say. I mean, we said, I mean, I know you're going to ask me upon future coalitions. We've said it, and we've made it public that we will have coalitions with everyone which needs that the government, which will be with us, that the government changes, that there is rotation in the next 6 months.
Well, let me ask you, I was going to ask you about coalitions.
So in terms of ideology, it will be easier this time.
Let me ask you about the Red and Black Alliance. I saw recent opinion polls. Again, I don't know how accurate they are, but they've come up. I think 15% of voters, potential voters, say they would potentially vote for the alliance. What do you attribute the success, the rising success of the Red and Black Alliance to? Is it nationalism? Is it anti-establishmentism? What is it precisely?
I think it's anti-establishment. They are playing an anti-establishment language, and I cannot deny it. I mean, Albanians are a little bit tired from our big parties, because we governed this country for 20 years. I mean, the Democratic Party governed at least for 13. If you gather them from 1991 till now, they've been 13 years in power. We've been some 8 or 9 years overall. But more or less, we both, I mean, the 2 big parties governed this country for the last 20 years. And when Albanians think what they were looking for 20 years ago, I don't think they're a happy population. They think they could have done more. And they think they couldn't did more because the 2 big parties didn't govern properly and the way they had to. So there is some sense of fatigue in the Albanian electorate, and this is what explains the anti-establishment parties like Red and Black, their success, if there is any success, because we still don't know. It's too early to say. I mean, it's too early to call these elections as you use it in America. But I think that as soon as the elections approach, the 2 big parties again will be much more sound. And if they are much more sound and much more visible, again the vote of the electorate will be polarized. And 90% of the vote will go to the 2 big parties. The rest probably will be spread around for the big, small, or the small, or the smalls.
So in terms of coalition building before the elections, or even after the elections, is there a possibility that socialists could go in coalition with the Socialist Movement for Integration?
It depends. It depends on them coming out of the government before elections. I have no reasons to doubt on their interest. But first of all, if you want to come to be in opposition, you have, I mean, this is the alpha of politics. You cannot be in opposition and in government for the same time. So the LSI should get out of government if they want to stick with us and have a coalition beforehand with us.
But it's too early to say, presumably.
It's very early to say, yeah.
We'll come back to this at some point in the next few months, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Let me turn now to foreign policy. As I said at the during the introductions you served as Deputy Foreign Minister, and I'm sure you follow very closely.
That's a job I forgot, huh? It's
Don't forget, it's a very important.
14 years ago.
14 years ago, but I'm sure you've kept up to date with particularly regional developments, particularly the EU question. Well, let me ask you specifically on the international integration question, the EU question. Would you say that the government and parliament are doing enough for Albania to qualify for candidate status, given that, the parliament now needs to pass these specific legislation in order to make sure that it qualifies, that it meets those criteria? Are they doing enough?
Well, this is a very partisan debate in the country, and I'm part of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not someone who could speak out of the party arguments or interests. But I think what happened in the country during the last year, when we lost again for the third time in a row, we lost the candidate status of the European Union. I think, again, this argument will be voted in the next elections. So Albanians who follow the failure, let's say, of the political class to give the country the status for a third time in a row, when Croatians are getting in, when Macedonians have it, when Serbs already have it, when Bosnians have it, except of us. I think this argument will be voted in the next elections. And this is one more reason. The Albanians go to vote and choose among those who, according to us, having no reforms and not trying to get the consensus with the opposition, they block the status. And on the other hand, have to vote for us, which we think that after the elections, when we are in government, of course we'll try to get consensus with the opposition by any cost to get the status. They didn't do it.
But you don't think the legislation will be passed before the elections? You're saying it will be after the elections?
I think so. I think it will be passed after the elections, because the time is very short, and nothing is changing to offer consensus to the opposition. We'll play it differently. We'll play consensually. We'll try to negotiate the opposition, something this government doesn't do, and it's not willing to do.
Do the socialists share any of the blame, do you think, for this blockage?
We'll see that during the elections. I told you, the elections will tell us something we still don't know. Which is the part to blame for this failure? It is us or it is the government? I think it's the government, but of course Albanians have to tell it better.
So the public will decide, basically?
I think so.
So there will be a debate on these questions throughout the campaign?
Of course, of course.
What are the major issues, before I turn actually more to regional policy, what are the major issues would one expect to be debated during the campaign?
Economy first. Economy. Unemployment, European integration, corruption, agriculture is a big theme. As I told you, education, health services, prices, taxes. These are, I think, 5 or 6 or 7 main issues we'll be debating during the campaign. And we will have concrete proposals for any issue. We're going to tell Albanians how much we're going to tax them. If they get, let's say, 1,000 euros per month, how much we're going to tax them. If they get 2,000 euros per month, we're going to tell them how much we're going to tax them. We're going to tell farmers what we're going to do for them. We're going to tell teachers and pupils and students how we're going to protect them and give them better books and more quality system, education system. We're going to be much more concrete, starting from probably February, next month.
Okay, let me turn now to, we'll come back to the elections, I'm sure, at future days. Let me turn now to regional policy in particular. And let me ask you very specifically, how would you respond, or what is your opinion of the Prime Minister's recent, Albanian Prime Minister's recent statement about national reunification of Albanians? Would you say such statements are dangerous, potentially destabilizing, threatening regional stability? How would you characterize such statements?
I don't take that very seriously, in fact. because the Prime Minister has lost the capacity to harm the region any longer. He can harm his country, of course, and he's doing at his best it every day. But he has no capacity to harm the region, because not only us as a country and as a population, as people, but even other countries and people in the region, we all want peace. I mean, we're very tired from fighting. We have fights in the area a few years ago in Kosovo, before that in Bosnia and in Croatia. No one wants Macedonia, of course. We want peace, generally speaking. And that's the reason I don't take the Prime Minister very seriously. I mean, this is what he did and what he's doing, talking on nationalism. It's someone, at the end of the days, he has nothing else to say. If it speaks on economy, he knows it's very, very bad for him. So he's just shifting the language. Instead of speaking on economy, on public debt, on infrastructure, on education, on health system, on insurances, on pensions, he chooses to speak on nationalism, trying to be more interested, at least. But I don't think people are following him. They're not going to vote in these elections. Who's going to unite Albania with Kosovo? This is not an issue, and it should not be an issue this time. The issue, it is economy. And I used to have an article a few weeks ago, and I think that, of course, one day there will be a unification process among us and Kosovo. But the only element who prevents this from doing faster than it could, it is Albania. Unless Albania is so weak, so poor, it's not very stable. It is this very conflictual political life. Mm-hmm. Albania is the factor of preventing or slowing down the process of unification. And unless Albania doesn't move forward as a better democracy, as a self-sustaining economy, as a country where political class doesn't struggle the whole day, but it gets consensus for big issues, unless we change the country, the process of unification will be, because no one will support that two very poor countries like us and Kosovo unite to create a bigger problem in the Balkans. I think Americans and Europeans, they are helping us to be two stable democracies and two stable countries, and unless we're not, the unification process will slow down again, as the integration process has been slowing down and never ending.
Right. Are you saying that once Albania is a member of the European Union, then the possibilities of integration with Kosovo will grow?
This is what everybody says, but I don't know. I probably don't know what we have to do first. Unite with Kosovo and then enter the European Union as a big country, or get to the European Union and get united there. But in the European Union, we'll, in the same way, we'll be united with Macedonians, with Serbs, with Croatians, with Lithuanians, with Slovaks.
So when you talk about unification, you're not talking about political, a single political state. You're talking about the criteria of unity and integration within the European Union context.
No, everybody's talking. Everybody is having this answer when we're asked when the unification will happen, if someday. And everybody's saying when we get to the European Union, probably we'll be united there, as it's happening to most of the countries being part of the European Union. My question is, are we going to unite with the Kosovo Albanians, like we're going to unite with Slovaks and Brits and Germans and Lithuanians and Croatians and Serbs? Or are we going to have a different kind of unification and then get to the European Union? If it was for me to choose, I'll choose the second, of course. Mm-hmm. But we have a better unification process in terms of economy, education, cultural in general, media, and then get to the full unification, of course.
So your message would be focus on economic development, regional cooperation, European integration, and the unification process will come naturally during the course of that time.
Yeah, I think so.
Let me ask you about other countries in the neighborhood. As you know, Macedonia, you mentioned Macedonia several times, it is blocked from European Union membership. It is blocked from NATO membership, for reasons we know, dispute with Athens. Do you think this could eventually undermine the integrity of the state in Macedonia? Are you fearful of the future of Macedonia?
No. No. I think despite the differences they have in Macedonia, I think they prove that they have a certain level of maturity, I mean the political class, a certain level of maturity to protect stability of their country. And of course, America and the European Union are very important factors in this area. And both America and the European Union, they never allow that Macedonia disintegrates. It is such an important state for the stability of this area. So no risk, I think, will be allowed to be taken there. Although they have very big internal problems. But time, of course, made them and taught them to be much more mature when it comes to big decisions. And I hope Macedonia will do that again.
Mm-hmm. What is your view, to Macedonia again, on the Albanian leadership there? As you know, it's very deeply divided between two of the major parties. What would be your message to the Albanian leaders?
I never understood why they went into this big division among them. I wish we had just one Albanian party there, and I wish it for 4 years. Of course, now it's too late that they get to that. And but I hope the Albanian parties in Macedonia be more cooperative with them, and they have lots of things in common, and they have lots of goals in common. If they all the time they complain that the Macedonians discriminate Albanians, which is true for many reasons. This is one more reason that they get united and they have a better cooperation in parliament and out of parliament, in the local government. And I think if they try, they can do that. And of course, if there is something Albania could do for the Albanians in Macedonia, we could speak to them in a different language, try to get the Albanian parties of Macedonia on the same table and try to, what we cannot do here, we can export that to Macedonia. Of course, we're not a very democratic country, but when it comes to national interest, I think we can export some level of democracy for them and of consensus.
Do you have good relations with both parties? I mean, you socialists have good relations with both parties?
Yeah, we have very good relations with both parties there. Both big parties, because they have more than two
parties as well. That's right. I'm talking about the two, Mr. Taci and Mr. Ahmeti's parties. Well, let me turn to Greece now. Greece, as you know, is going through this major social crisis. There's new tax hikes in Greece. Winter season is there. It's going to get tougher for a lot more people. Always a potential, I would say, of a major social reaction, even a social explosion in Greece against this major austerity measures. What impact is this having on Albania, both politically and economically? Do you see any dangers ahead there?
No, in terms of political, it has no impact at all in Albania. In terms of economy, of course, the level of remittances, I mean, money sent who came here from Greece in the last 20 years, the remittances were very, very, very important for our economy. Mm-hmm. Lots of families, especially in the poor areas and in the villages, were living out of that. They were living out of the money their children or their parents or their relatives sent it from Greece to Albania. This amount has decreased, and more Albanians are coming back to work and to have some small business or to find a better life in Albania. And in that way, of course, the impact is very negative. It's very, very negative. And our economy is suffering a lot from the Greek economy. That's for sure.
Let me turn to Serbia. How would you characterize the Nikolic presidency? Is it a factor of stability or a factor of uncertainty, potential instability in the region?
I think in terms of language, maybe he's much more aggressive than his predecessor. And it seems to because he used to be a nationalist before, and he won elections in a nationalistic platform. Mm-hmm. But I see that Serbs, they understood that they lost Kosovo. And since they understood that they're not finding the way out to how to deal with that issue, and it's becoming more and more electoral issue than a national issue, I think, Kosovo for them. They play in with Kosovo anytime they have elections. And they continue to do that.
I would say it's privately understood but not publicly acknowledged.
Yeah,
that
they will not acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. Even the day they divorce it with Kosovo completely. And what they're doing now, they're not negotiating how to marriage, they're negotiating how to divorce with Kosovo. Mm-hmm. That's the reason they Taci and Dacic, they go frequently to Brussels. Mm. It's the divorce platform they negotiate there. But I think, on the other hand, Serbs, they did understand that with the loss of Russian influence in the region, and they have only one way, and the only way is European Union. And I think they're more ready than before to bargain Kosovo with the European Union. And this is what they're doing then.
Albania's regional role, how would you depict it? Is it... can it be strengthened? How would it differ, let's say, under a socialist administration? What would you do specifically to, let's say, enhance Albania's national interests in the region?
I told you, we'll explore democracy. I mean, looks very, very futuristic, but we're going to do it. I mean, if this country is more democratic under our leadership, which unfortunately is not today, if the country is more prosperous because of economical reforms, if the gap among poor and rich in this country softens, if there are more foreign investments in the country, and if we speed up with the European integration process, I think the country will be better as it is. And we can achieve these goals in 2 or 3 years of our mandate. And if the country changes and it has a better perception outside and inside for the European Union and for foreign investors, I think we can export our democracy in Kosovo and Macedonia. And that shows that this will be good for Macedonia, will be good for Kosovo also. And this is, I think, the way we're going to perform our role in the region. We cannot do more than that. Why should we do more than that?
Let me turn to the United States, key partner for Albania. I always leave these questions close to the end. What do you expect from the second Obama administration? Should America be more engaged in Albania's, let's say, internal affairs, pushing certain processes, combating corruption, good governance, building the democracy as a potential export model in the region, or should it be less engaged? You know, what should be specifically the role of the United States in Tirana?
Well, even if the political class will wish they won't have this role, the Americans will do that, of course. Because American institutions, they function, even if the administration is already focusing in different areas of this world. And the world is not very stable, again. So there are more important areas to focus on, like, and not only Balkans. We might think that Balkans had moved from the agenda of this administration in the last 4 years. Mm. I don't think so. This is not because America is losing interest on the Balkans. It is because Balkans is getting, even because of America, even because of the American role in the region, is much more stable and much more democratic. So, in a way, I think the American institutions will still tell us when the level of democracy is not good, when elections are not proper, when corruption is high, as it has happened. Americans have speak up, and I think they will, as it happened during the Hillary Clinton visit in Parliament, which was so inspiring. But unfortunately, what she asked didn't happen, but it was still inspiring, and it was one of the best speeches I ever heard in this Parliament.
So what you're saying is America should maintain, let's say, a close monitoring, encouraging, stimulating role in Albanian politics?
Yeah, I wish so.
Let me turn now to a more personal question. Just got a couple of questions left to ask you. You've covered a lot of territory. In terms of your own personal political ambitions, given a hypothetical situation that the socialists may lose this election, the coming parliamentary elections, there may be cause for some kind of leadership change. Do you have such aspirations to lead the Socialist Party?
Nobody of us is thinking of that day. We're all concentrated in these elections, and after 8 years in opposition, we all think we're more mature and more able and much more prepared to come to power, and would like to come to power as a group and as a party who has some ideas, and some ideas to reform this country. And this is the big test for us. I mean, we're more or less the same age and the same, I mean, most of us. We started politics in the last 20 years. And 20 years ago, we were students. So it is a big time for our generation to prove that the country could be reformed and could be changed by our generation, because every generation has some responsibilities to its country. And this is one more difference. I mean, Mr. Berisha belongs to a more aged generation. Older generation. I think what he could do for this country, he has already done. So his time is off now. It's time for us to prove that we could do something different, and we'll do that.
So what is your election slogan for the Socialist Party?
Change, of course. Change will be the main headline, but we still are not at that point. It's we're going to decide that during the next months. But of course, we're going to propose change. Change will be main focus.
Right. My very last question, as I mentioned at the outset, you are a successful novelist, at least with your first book, which I gather is a bestseller. Are you writing a new book? Are you preparing something now? And if so, what is the subject?
I wish I could, but I'm not. I'm not, because I'm very focused on this campaign, and we had to get out of Tirana at least 3 or 4 days per week. And I wish I could write, but it's not the proper time. My things and my thoughts are completely dedicated to politics nowadays. And when you think politics, you cannot make literature. This is for sure.
So politics does not help your literary aspirations?
Not for the moment. A few years ago, yes. And I used to say sometimes, and people were asking me, how come that you make politics as a profession and you write books? And I said, this is one of the benefits I have from this profession. Because when you're a politician, especially in opposition, you don't have to get up in the morning very early. You might sleep, then write, and then get out. Nobody will tell you when to go to the office, because we have no office. So I had this luxury in the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm very glad of it. I'm very glad I could did it, because it was a very old dream of mine.
Well, I'm looking forward to potential English translation in order to read, unless I learn fluent Albanian. Ben Blushit, thank you very much for being with me, for being on the show, and I'm sure we'll have you back at some point. The election season is just beginning, as you know, so I'm sure at some point we will have either you or other members of the Socialist Party. And again, thank you very much. Congratulations on your career on the book, and look forward to meeting you again soon.
Thank you, Janusz. My pleasure.
In a moment, we'll be back with my second commentary and my discussion with our studio audience. My second commentary on an important regional topic is entitled Serbia Wants Another Bosnia. A national platform recently announced by the Serbian government claims that Northern Kosovo should become an autonomous entity along the lines of Bosnia's Republika Srpska. If such a plan ever comes to fruition, the Kosovo version of Bosnia would have even less political unity or territorial integrity. Belgrade demands a high level of autonomy for 4 northern municipalities, as well as for Serbian enclaves in central and southern Kosovo. According to the platform, the Serb entity would have exclusive authority in the judiciary, internal affairs, economic and fiscal policies, education, culture, media, agriculture, mining, energy, and trade. The platform also demands the entity's direct links with Belgrade. Unsurprisingly, the proposal is unacceptable to Pristina, while the EU reaction has been muted. Since Kosovo's declaration of independence, Brussels has been slow in dealing with the semi-partition territories. They have not featured in EU-sponsored talks between Belgrade and Pristina because officials believe such problems can be postponed. Belgrade has now challenged Brussels by placing the Northern Kosovo question on the agenda. The crux of the problem is that Serbia refuses to accept that the final status of Kosovo has already been decided. The Belgrade platform confirms that the Serbian authorities are intent on exploiting the EU dialogue to place pressure on Pristina. Instead of waiting for Belgrade's initiatives, the Thaci government needs to adopt a more assertive position, and it has several possible options. Pristina can offer to discuss the development of collective rights for the Serbian minority once Belgrade moves towards acknowledging Kosovo's independence and final status. It can also withdraw from the EU-sponsored talks with Belgrade until Brussels takes a tougher stance on the integrity of the state. Instead of playing defensively, the government can disarm the assault on its sovereignty by taking the offensive. Let me turn now to our studio audience for a discussion about politics and world affairs. What is on the minds of Albanian citizens? Today in the studios we have students from the European University of Tirana. Welcome, thank you for being here. Let me get up and come closer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, welcome your questions and discussion, please. Who's first?
Vera Ahmati from European University of Tirana, Department of Political Science and International Relations. My question is that, what typology have the political parties in Albania?
What?
Typology have the political...
Typology?
Yeah.
You must be studying political systems, I presume. Typology meaning, are they left, are they right, and so forth. I think a lot has changed in political typologies or the political spectrum in Europe over the past 20 years. Particularly since the collapse of European communism in Eastern Europe. I think the left and the right have moved much closer in many respects, and we now call them center-left and center-right. And quite frankly, in many cases, it's difficult to discern what distinguishes them. Again, I'm not exactly sure whether a socialist government or a democrat government is going to have such major differences as there were in the past between socialist parties and center-right or rightist parties. I would say in the case of Albania, it's very specific policy prescriptions. In other words, the role of the state, public spending, attitude towards business, regulation of business or less regulation. So it's in, I would say, the more detailed policies rather than a swing left towards a traditional sort of socialist platform or traditional rightist, laissez-faire conservative platform. It's much more in the center and focused on specific policy prescriptions.
Thank you.
Please.
Jenny Hidri from European University of Tirana. Mr. Bugajski, what do you think about the democracy in Albania? Do you think that it is an operative law in a time when we every day watch and read about scandals?
Mm-hmm. No, very good question. The state of democracy in Albania. I would characterize Albania as still a developing democracy. It's still not, I would say, it's consolidated in some areas, but not all. as we've seen with the EU conditions in order to gain candidate status for Albania. I think they've located some of the points in which Albania has to make some changes, pass legislation and implement that legislation. Scandals in themselves do not disqualify a country from being a democracy. We have plenty of scandals in the United States, and there's many European Union countries that have scandals. The question is, how are they handled? Is the rule of law applied? Is there equality under the law, whether you're a politician or not a politician? So in other words, no immunity, no impunity from the political elite. And in many respects, I would say there is still progress to be made. In Albania, I think major test is going to be elections. I don't put everything on the elections, but this would be a major test, not only whether they're conducted freely and fairly, but whether they're legitimate to both parties and to the public, as well as to the European Union. So the next few months, I think, are going to be critical in determining the nature of those elections and the consequences of those elections. Please.
Hello, Mr. Bugajski. I am Adela from European University of Tirana. Now I'm escaping from Albania and I'm going into America. I have listened that Obama government has decided to withdraw the government troop from NATO within 2014. It could be, or maybe, could it be the end of NATO, or its mission will go on without USA? And also, have USA created another organization like NATO to have the control in international area?
When you say withdraw from NATO, you mean NATO withdraw from Afghanistan by 2014?
Yes.
Yeah, because we're not withdrawing from NATO.
No,
I mean, I've been out of the country for 24 hours, but I don't think there's been such major changes. No, I understand what you mean. It's something that was laid out, I think, in the first Obama administration, and it's now, I think, going to be speeded up. In other words, to make a full withdrawal of US troops, but I think most of the other NATO troops will also leave Afghanistan. There will be a small force left, I think, for training purposes, you know, securing the US mission, a few other functions and so forth, more or less like in Iraq, where we've withdrawn, where America's withdrawn troops. The big question, I suppose, is what happens to Afghanistan after the withdrawal, and then what will be the reputation of NATO if the situation in Afghanistan were to deteriorate.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think Afghanistan can be easily resolved just in a few years of a military mission. This is a very complex country. This is a country that's really never had a strong central government, let alone a strong democracy. It's a very factionalized, tribalized, if you like, regionalized state. The danger in Afghanistan, if a more extremist movement such as the Taliban were to come into power and try to enforce a specific ideology, such as we witnessed when they were in power, which could potentially lead to the disintegration of Afghanistan, which would then create a major regional crisis, I would say, throughout Central Asia and South Asia. Again, I don't want to predict it, but I think we have to be aware of the dangers that Afghanistan faces after the NATO mission. Second part of the question, in terms of NATO, again, NATO credibility is going to be on the line. If after Afghanistan, if we are seen to have not have succeeded in Afghanistan, there will be less appetite for any future NATO missions which are seen as state building or state consolidating missions. It doesn't mean NATO will become irrelevant, but it will be less, let's say, usable in situations where we want to build a stable democratic system.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Esmeralda Topuzi from European University of Tirana.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Esmeralda Topuzi from European University of Tirana. My question is, as I heard from Mr. Blushit, one of his proposals were to wipe out the flat taxes. Which is more relevant to economic sustainability, to provide facilities for the poor people, or to give opportunities of the rich people to invest on the country?
It's an excellent question, and one that a lot of governments have been grappling with in Central Eastern Europe. There are some governments, for example, to my knowledge, in Slovakia and other countries that did bring in a flat tax, on the supposition that a flat tax would mean bigger revenues. In other words, that there'd be less tax evasion if you knew that there was a certain amount each year that you'd be paying. So those that are for a flat tax argue that the tax base will actually increase and revenues will increase by imposing a flat tax across the board. There are others, as you heard, usually socialists or social democrats, that say that's unfair because you're not only penalizing the poor, but that the rich are able to get away with more earnings because the flat tax will mean that they don't pay the proportionally higher part of their income as taxation. The argument has not been fully resolved. I think both are worth trying, but it depends on the context. I think the key isn't so much even whether it's a flat tax or a graded tax, proportional tax, but whether tax revenue is successful. In other words, whether you're able to collect all the taxes that the state is owed. And we've seen in your neighbor to the south that that was not the case in Greece. And that contributed in a major way, I think, to the crisis, to the financial crisis, to the debt crisis in Greece. And it's something they're trying to come to terms with now. Please.
My name is Fran Shaheen. I'm come from European University of Tirana. So I have a simple question. What is your opinion during the statement, on the statement of the Prime Minister for granting Albanian citizens, and how does this affect the relation between Albania and neighboring countries?
Granting Albanian citizenship, Albanian passports to all neighbors. Well, it's a complicated issue. I mean, there are countries in Europe that already have such procedures. I'll give you a very good example in the case of Croatia, which is about to enter the European Union, as you know, this year. The Croatian government grants citizenship to Croats in Bosnia, Herzegovina Croats and others in Bosnia-Herzegovina. They can vote in the elections for the Croatian Sabor, for the Croatian parliament and the presidency. In the case of Albania, I would say if Albania was already in the European Union, on its way to the European Union, I think it would be probably less of a problem. The only question I would say, and I've heard this from some people, is granting passports and citizenship to Kosovars where they are not part yet of the visa liberalization program will make it difficult for Albania, particularly if there are high stays, you know, people that go to Europe and stay there. So that's a question that needs to be resolved. How this will play off politically, I'm not exactly sure, because does it mean that these people then have a right to vote in Albanian elections? Because that could change quite dramatically the political situation here. If you have, I don't know, 1 million Kosovars and 500,000 from Macedonia, Montenegro, Preševo Valley, Greece, also voting in Albanian elections, that will have a major political impact. So I would think our leaders, or your leaders, have to think a little bit about what it will mean politically as well as economically, as well as your relations with the European Union, before such legislation is passed and such practices are taken. Please, anybody else?
My name is Brenton. A couple of days ago, we had the chance to welcome in a Skype video conference Professor Johan Galtung from Conflict and Peace Studies, and he gave us his proposal, he introduced us his proposal on the Mitrovica issue in Kosovo. He proposed a cantonic system, just like the Swiss model, and he said that this could probably bring the parties closer to each other. What do you think on this?
I haven't heard the details of his proposal, but so many times I've heard we should adopt the Swiss system. It sounds good in theory, but Switzerland is a very rich country. It's a very stable country. It's a multi-ethnic country, a multi-linguistic country. It really has no separatist. No people within Switzerland have separatist ambitions. They actually love living in Switzerland and respect the central government. Technically, yes, if it would work, but I fear that it won't. I think what it would do in the case of Kosovo, as we've seen in Bosnia, Bosnia's federation, remember, has cantons, and it really does not make that entity work very well. What I fear is cantonization of Kosovo would decentralize the state to such a degree that it won't function at the center. In other words, if the cantons have too much autonomy, which is part of the proposal of the Serb platform, the current platform, then it would disable a proper functioning, proper decision-making by the central government. And what we need in Kosovo is a functioning, legitimate state that can make progress in building a good economy, progress towards the political criteria for European Union membership, and to get on that ladder, get on that path towards the EU. I don't think this would be, at least from what I understand, would be a very good solution. Not at this point. Please, who's next?
Evanthi Pango, European University of Tirana. Mr. Bugajski, sorry. Albanians are tired of hearing the same things before every elections. Do you think we need something new, a new wave, beyond these existing political parties?
Do we need more political parties, is what you're saying?
A new wave, something new.
Something new. Well, it's up to you. You're the young people. You're
a new political party, maybe.
You're the new generation. You're the new voters. You know, this is your country. You decide. You vote for who you want, or you create parties. You know, this is, to build a democracy, to make it a functioning democracy, you have to be involved in the political system. And I don't just mean going once a year to vote, or once every 4 years, sorry, to vote, or voting at local elections. Get involved politically, get involved at local level, start changing things, start making the local politicians accountable to the electorate, talk to them, make them answerable to voters. You know, young people, you're the future of Albania. It's up to you. I can't answer the question how to change Albania. You have to do it, because you know better than I do what Albania needs to do at local level and at national level. And if enough of you get together and demand this and push this within a democratic setting, it will happen. I'm an optimist. Please, who's next?
Welcome. My name is Florian Elezi from European University of Tirana, and my question is if our country kept it in a European for terms of common currency euro to common currency euro to what will bring in the
what benefits
local economy in Albania, and how will bring to familiar in this economy?
Well, let me say you're a long way from being part of the monetary union or the Eurozone. In fact, there are countries within the European Union that are not part of the monetary union, not part of the monetary zone, and certainly don't want to be part of any fiscal union that the European Union is now proposing. Britain, for example, is a very good example. Poland is another good example, which is a very successful economy that's outside the Eurozone, the monetary zone. So that is the decision that isn't just yours, because Albania, once it enters the European Union, and I don't know when that's going to be, would then have to qualify in order to become part of the monetary union. That itself is a very complex process. You know, inflation, GDP, I mean, there's many factors involved, and it could become even stricter as a result of the crisis now in the monetary zone. And there are countries that up until recently said they want to be part of the monetary union, such as Czech Republic, and they're now having second thoughts whether this is a good idea. The reason being, of course, that they would have to then participate in bailouts to members of the monetary union that have massive debts, such as Greece, Spain, Italy, and other countries. So there is hesitation now, I think, to do that. But you're a long way away from now. I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't have sleepless nights over this at this point. Please.
Hello, my name is Zenel Zenouni, and I'm studying international relations. I have a simple question. Why American people voted for the second time Barack Obama?
Well, I haven't yet spoken to every American person, but...
in your opinion?
I think for a couple of reasons. First of all, the general sort of economic climate, which has not been good in recent years. But I think what helped Obama just before the elections was that some of the economic statistics started to look a bit better. Some of the productivity, employment, job creation in particular, started to look a little bit better. Secondly, I do believe that people didn't necessarily vote for Obama with the same enthusiasm as 4 years before, but they thought he would provide continuity. At least they knew who this guy was. Whereas there was feeling I still think about Romney, about the Republican candidate, that he was an unknown factor. And I think what people didn't want was some new shock to the economy, to the political status, to America's international role. And I think the third factor was, I think there was support regarding the international policies of Obama. Withdraw from Iraq, withdraw from Afghanistan. That was broadly supported, I think, across the political spectrum. And ultimately, I think it's independents. It's not Democrats or Republicans that decide the elections. I think it's independents. And a lot of independents thought that what Obama was promoting, what his program was more palatable, more implementable than Romney's. I think that's what it boiled down to. Anyway, thank you very much. That is the last question. And unfortunately, we have already come to the end of the show. As usual, I have greatly enjoyed being with you and all of my colleagues here at Albanian Screen. Good night, everyone. And please remain healthy, productive, and optimistic. And I'll see you all soon in Tirana. Miro Pafshim.